GMX or GMX is the latest TCG world premiere archetype, and like a vast majority of its kindred, it is a good start that will need a solid second wave of support to fill in some pretty serious holes. These dinosaur-themed cards are actually generally not dinosaurs. Yet. The researchers of genomics, like Saland, are actually just studying reviving dinosaurs, like the returned dino Deneen. Well, except for the head researchers, Kimridge and Noma, who seem to be looking into becoming dinos themselves. Noma even displays the results of their testing, hence her reptile typing. Their latest test, Applied Experiment number 55, has finally achieved the desired result, transforming Kimridge into the terrifying Alos, and Noma into the devastating Velox. But that's all we got so far. 7 cards is not a ton actually, especially when they're all monsters except for one singular spell. It makes for a svelte engine, but not a lot of diversity in your end board. And if even one of those cards is kinda a stinker, you're gonna be stuck waiting until Wave 2. So let's take a look at these cards, starting with what's supposed to be the starter, Saland. Saland on summon specials a level 3 or lower dino from the deck. This can get her companion Deneen, but it also grabs cards like Baby Ceratosaurus, Petite Ranodon, or Animadorn Archosaur to pop those babies if you have them in hand. Like the rest of the GMX crew, she also has an effect on special summon, likely by Alos or Velox. On special, Saland grabs you a GMX spell trap, which right now means just Mambo number 55. Then she also has an ignition effect on the field, where if you control a dino fusion, you can shuffle her back to non-targeting negate a face-up card for the rest of the turn. If that was a quick effect, then we'd be really cooking with gas, but it's not. So instead, it's more designed to help push through established boards. On its own, Saland is an interesting card, giving a few new starters to Dino, but not really elevating the game plan in any meaningful way. Summoning the babies or Archosaur isn't really groundbreaking for Dinos, and she conflicts with the normal summon of Oviraptor. At least she lets us go into Rhoda and even Durandal if you're really down bad. To figure out her true power though, we're going to have to take a look at what she's supposed to be summoning in Archetype. Well, I say Archetype, but Return Dino Deneen is not a GMX card. Yes, this is yet another archetype that is secretly 2 archetypes, just to fuck you over, and add more text to Velox. Despite that, Deneen is a powerful card that on special summon searches a GMX monster. Simple as that. Deneen can be summoned by her friend Saland, of course, and the effect of Velox or Alos that we'll get into later, but also by Misk, all by itself because it's that singular star. Oviraptor Grab Misk is an instant Deneen, and thus a search as well. And then once you've done your search, we also get our first fusion effect with material from hand and field, classic style. And remember, you just grab the GMX that you can use as material. You can make any dino fusion though, so if you have Chaetoptera or a normal monster, you can also make Hornsaurus or Gigazowler respectively. Let's be real though, you're probably making Alos or Velox. And you're probably using Deneen as material. When Deneen hits the grave from that or anything else, your dinos get 400 extra attack points. Now you might be thinking that that doesn't matter and it's kinda dog shit. And you'd be right! Now if you're wondering what you're grabbing off of Deneen's search, it's probably Kimridge. Kimridge is the only card in this entire archetype that does something in the hand, shuffling itself into the deck to search experiment number 55 specifically. If you want any other GMX card that comes in Wave 2, sorry, you're out of luck. Kimridge also has an effect on special summon that stacks the deck with GMX or Dino cards from the grave, and then can pop an opponent's monster. No, we got a removal effect. That's a pretty good start for some interaction. Oh wait, I'm continuing to read the card and it says only attack position monsters. Why? Were the team designing this really concerned that the deck would be too strong if you could destroy a defense position monster? Come the fuck on. Anyway, if you're wondering how you're summoning this to proc the effect, you of course have Alos and Velox. We'll get to those later, again. But that's really about it. It's a level 4 psychic monster, so E-Tele doesn't work, and none of the dino tools do either. You can maybe get a stupid psychic combo together to do it, but you still have to have GMX or dino cards in grave too. So yeah, it's gonna have to be one of the fusions, so just be patient for that. The last main deck monster we have is our other head researcher, Noma. Noma is a bit of an unfortunate outlier, one might even say a stinker. She of course has an on-special summon effect where she stacks a card from each graveyard either in the top or the bottom of the deck. She's like a whack-ass DD Crow that also stacks your deck, more on that later. Her second effect is to fusion summon when your opponent summons a monster by shuffling materials from field, grave, or banishment. Only GMX on this fusion summon though, don't get it twisted. As usual, she's a 4-star reptile, so she's only getting special summoned by our fusion monsters. She's not a terrible card, she's just really awkward to use. More of a follow-up card than anything else. She's really good recovery for formats that tend to go long, like Genesis or Domain, but that's about it. I don't know, maybe Wave 2 will make her make more sense. Next up, let's look at the spell, because this gives important context for the fusions. Applied Experiment number 55 is a really unique card, letting you fusion summon a GMX monster with materials from the deck by excavating the top of your deck until you find a GMX card and a Dino card. Essentially, it's branded fusion, except you can't choose the materials. Oh, also you take a shit ton of damage. For every card you excavate while trying to find a GMX and a Dino, you take 400 damage. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, and of course the only life points that matters is the last one, especially with the recent time change rules. But it is entirely possible to FTK yourself with these cards. It only takes 20 excavations to get to 8,000 damage. Only 10 excavations brings you down to half your health. You're at the very least excavating 2 cards for a 10th of your total health. If you're really lucky, you can activate this effect a total of 10 times without healing. This is simultaneously a really interesting way to prevent the branded fusion problem of just being 2 foolish burials by forcing semi-random sends instead, while also being an innovative way to force you to run a critical mass of GMX and Dino cards to make it harder to instant loss yourself, while also being a really frustrating limitation on this deck that makes it very chance reliant. If it's gonna be a casino deck like this, it has to be worth the risk, like early Tearlament. Luckily, you can play this deck in a way where the hits on this card don't really matter too much. It's more when you hit them so that you don't die immediately. Future waves could help this too by increasing the amount of cards you actually want to play. Still, because this is essentially the only extension the deck has, you gotta run 3, in addition to the 3 Kimridge to search it. It's that important. And the context of this life point cost helps explain why both Alos and Velox have a life point gain as they regenerate, like Magic the Gathering's, Disney's, Marvel's, Spider-Man's The Lizard. They have to recover from the trauma of being transformed into a dinosaur. Their regeneration is slower than their damage, as it gains only 200 life points for each summon the opponent makes. You need your opponent to summon twice for every card you excavate, which could be pretty dangerous to allow. Now, Alos is the first fusion you'll likely want to summon, so we'll describe him first. Kimridge's new form has apparently made him the Reanimator, baby, allowing him to summon a GMX card or Dino from the grave or banishment. This is a really good extension effect for the deck, so of course there's a cost that prevents him from attacking the turn he uses that effect. Anyways, the second effect allows him to destroy a monster he battles at the start of the battle step. Extremely funny that these 2 effects turn each other off. If Alos even remains on the field, you'll most likely be using the second effect as a defensive measure on your opponent's turn when you can't use the ignition effect. Alos ends up as a really strong extra deck extension tool that can also trigger GMX summon effects, but doesn't really contribute much to the end board. This puts all the pressure of creating an end board in this first wave on the other fusion monster, Velox, and that's a lot of pressure. Velox attempts to live up to this by being kinda Trident. In addition to the life gain effect, she can excavate until you find a Dino or GMX card, add or summon that card, and then pop a targeted card on field. As you might expect, this effect also causes you to lose 400 life for each card excavated. So now we have 2 of these effects, further increasing the chances of you accidentally FTKing yourself. 10 excavations on each effect and you're dead. 5 excavations on each and you're half dead, and you've only accomplished 1 interruption. Now, because she can summon what she excavated, this can also proc the on-summon effects of the GMX researchers. But much like number 55, there's a major problem here. You have no control over what you get off of her. If you need to pop a card before your opponent has a card in grave, Noma is a bit of a waste. If you need to pop but your opponent doesn't have attack position monsters, Kimridge is just going to go to your hand instead. Or, even worse, if you targeted an attack position monster that you need to remove, and then get Kimridge and can't pop a second monster because it's sitting sideways, you're going to want to flip a table. And then, if you get Saland, you just get follow-up, I guess? No immediate benefit at all? And a random Dino off the top could be a similar situation, or it could be Pankratops. Once again, it's a cool idea on paper, but the variance of it makes it very feast or famine, and the famine is going to feel miserable. And that's it. This is the intended end board of the deck on its own. Normal summon Saland becomes Alos and Velox, a guy who can't be walked into by battle, and a Trident that you can negate with Ash Blossom that sometimes has an extra effect randomly. Nothing in the back row, no effects in hand, no effects in grave. It's just not enough. And I haven't even mentioned how fragile this is. Any negate on Saland means the end of your turn unless you already have number 55 in your hand, in which case you have to excavate Danine to get into both fusions. Of course, you probably won't be playing this deck pure, even when the second wave comes out. So what does it do with the other Dino tools? Well, our starter shifts to Oviraptor, which is at 6 copies with Fossil Dig. Now we can grab Misk to summon Danine and do a combo that ends on Velox and an Evolzar instead of Alos. If you drew the Misk or an extra Fossil Dig that you can use to search it, you can also grab Ultimate Conductor Tyranno off the Ovi search instead and have that on the crackback. It's a bit more interaction on board, and different kinds at that. Not awful. Of course, it's still just as fragile. Basically everything I said about Saland applies to Oviraptor too, but now we also lose to DD Crow. Bad news for Genesis format. You can also do a Jurak build that once again relies on Misk, but can substitute Fossil Dig for Jurak Volcano. It ends on Jurak Astro instead of Dolka, and has a Quaddle line if you draw Misk or get a second Stego online that gets us into Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. Less consistent, even more fragile, but is able to be played under Genesis points, where it will still lose to an Effect Veiler or a DD Crow. I did my best, okay? I will say it's not all bad though. The first two engines are quite svelte, leaving us a lot of room for non-engine. Almost 20 slots of non-engine really lets us compete head-to-head on hand traps with modern decks. Even the Jurak build has a decent amount, although only 25 points to work with currently. Of course, every non-engine we excavate in any build is another 400 damage, but what are you gonna do, not play non-engine? I also like that we get to play with some very powerful Dino cards without having to deal with all of the Dino Garnets. No more babies, no more evolution pills unless you want to just throw a double in for fun, no more Giant Rex or Chaitoptera, no more Animadorned Archosaur. It's very freeing to never have to deal with these cards again, honestly. If you're a frequent viewer of the channel or have just seen any video I do about Speedroid, you know how much I hate Garnets. It's because I'm always drawing them. So I'm very pleased to see how many we can cut here. Like, if you aren't familiar with Dinosaur before this, the amount of Garnets that are gone from this list is unbelievable. Like a quarter of the normal Dinosaur deck is just Garnets. It's insane. I would be remiss to not mention that the engine also plays very well under Charmies and Maxi. For a TCG exclusive, it really seems designed with the OCG in mind. The engine accomplishes its main combo with 1 normal summon from the hand, 3 summons from the deck or extra deck, and 1 from the grave or banishment for a total of 4 special summons, and 1 extra summon for the extra if you're making the Dolka line. You could very easily get away with a lot less though, choosing to just make Velox immediately with the number 55. Here you only summon thrice. Perulia gets 1 draw, Fua and Maxi get 2 draws, and Meowls gets Jack Diddley. An end board of Trident with potential upside sounds a lot better when it's your Molcharmy end board that barely gives the opponent any draws. Both lines also play pretty well under Droll, which you're still likely to see eventually, even at 2 copies. The real problem is going to be any side engines blocked by Droll, or if their Molcharmy draws them into a negate that stops your combo. But as long as the opponent doesn't have negation or destruction, you're going to be able to play. Lastly, these cards are just really flavorful. This is a fun theme they're going with, and it's very easy to see how the mechanics of the cards tell the story in the art. They're pretty fun too. There's a reason people like Trident so much. She's fun to just sit on while not really being unfair in a modern format. Of course, the deck has some pretty fundamental flaws, some that can be fixed with a second wave or even later wave like the legendary single OCG support card, and then some that are just baked right into the archetype. Let's start with the ones that can and hopefully will be fixed with a second wave. The foremost issue in my mind is the lack of extension. This deck is all in its normal summon, whether Saland or Oviraptor, and then the 1 fusion spell, and that's it. none of the other cards can summon themselves. The deck is desperate for a Fimena, a Marshmallow, an Izuna, or even just an Eldum. Just any guy who can summon to the field and then get something started if you get interrupted. Preferably a turn 0 play, of course, but I'll take any extension tools at all. Anything to not lose to 1 or 2 hand traps, please. The next biggest issue is that while I like that this is a low to the ground deck, it's a little too low to the ground. We need a little bit more on the end board. I don't really care what it is as long as it's not another pop. We already have enough of those and nothing else unless we make Dolka in the Ovi line. I think we're likely to see a fusion between Saland and Deneen that'll hopefully help solve this problem. And then lastly, for the easily fixable problems, we only have 1 spell? Why do we only have 1 spell? That's really silly. We have a spell trap searcher that only searches 1 spell that's already specifically searched by another card. Where's the archetypal trap card to help diversify our end board? Where's another spell to help with our extension problems? Hopefully, almost certainly, in the second wave. And then we come to the problems that are immutable. They're printed in the cards we have already, and can't easily be undone by more cards. First and foremost is this excavation mechanic. The central mechanic of the archetype may be extremely flavorful, but it really fucks with playing this as an actual deck. If your opponent gets you low on life points, you can't activate your cards that make your deck work. The excavation variants can simply cost you a match by excavating the wrong card at the wrong time. And, of course, if you excavate 20 cards without healing from the fusions, you lose the game. If you're up against a deck that doesn't summon a ton, which tends to also be the grindier decks, you may not have enough activations of your cards to win. Now, I'm sure some of you are screaming at your screens about the stacking effects of Kimmeridge and Noma, but 3 things on that. 1, even if you stacked before excavation, you're still limited to 10 activations of the effect of number 55, plus 1 for every 2 summons while Velox is on the field, minus 1 for every 400 damage your opponent does to you, and every card you excavate with Velox for her effect. Say goodbye to the grind game. I guess you get more heals when Alos is on the field, but Alos has better things to do, like be material for Velox. 2, when are you doing these stacking effects? Are you seriously summoning Kimmeridge from grave with Alos turn 1 just to stack the top of your deck and then do nothing else? How are you doing that anyways? The only way Kimmeridge goes to the grave is if you use him as fusion material in hand with Danine and you didn't want number 55 for some reason, which would then make him go back into the deck. Or alternatively, you already used number 55 and randomly used him as material, but now you don't need the stack effect because you already did the fusion. Also, watch out because his search effect will shuffle any card you stack. Why doesn't he just stack himself on top of the deck when you search the fusion spell? Wouldn't that make more sense for an excavation archetype? And then 3, Noma is even worse because she has to have a card in the opponent's grave for her stack effect to even trigger. She might as well not even be considered a stack effect. That's just a side effect of her DD Crow effect. The same thing can happen to Kimmeridge if you don't have a GMX or Dino card in your graveyard to stack on top of your deck, which means you have to have done a fusion already. The stack effects just don't actually help you stave off death from all these excavation effects. They just don't. This excavation stuff is kinda a fun gimmick, but it doesn't leave much room in the archetype to explore it further. Unless Wave 2 introduces a lot more healing and better healing, I think adding any more excavation damage cards will just hurt the archetype more, which is a shame since it is the central gimmick the deck revolves around. And the deck also revolves around experiment number 55 specifically. It's the only spell trap currently for Saland's search, and it's the only thing Kimmeridge can search at all. So even if you did want to move away from this central gimmick, or at least reduce the harshness of it, you would have to print a lot more cards to fill these gaps. More spell traps to search, and another searcher to replace Kimmeridge. As we've seen with fellow world premiere archetype Warrock, one good centralizing spell is not enough to get an archetype across the finish line, even in Genesis format, and in fact, can just serve to stifle future design space. Hopefully this isn't the fate that befalls GMX, especially since even at just Wave 1, it's got a lot more going for it than Warrock's. To be clear, I don't think these baked-in flaws inherently doom the archetype, but I do think they put it off on the wrong foot, which means that future support will have to compensate for these drawbacks. So far in Wave 1, it doesn't seem to be happening. The payoff for all of these issues is you get to end on a Trident that can summon an additional random monster that's sometimes useful at the cost of being able to be ashed. You know what else? What other deck ends on a Trident with a 1-card combo that's even immune to Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring? Zodiac! That deck already does that! What are we doing here? Trident doesn't summon a monster because she doesn't have to. The other cards are good enough to support her. Or were good enough because, newsflash, it isn't 2017 anymore. This type of gameplay just doesn't cut it. Trident was only banned again because of Tri-Brigade, which put up a lot more than this deck, and even then, they just brought her off again despite, or perhaps because of, Tri-Brigade's new support. Luckily, the generic Dino tools help GMX a lot, but just not to the same degree. I think unfortunately, Konami is still too scared of Dino after all these years to make these cards as good as they need to be to compete with other decks. I mean, look at how Mist remains at 1 in the TCG and is 75 points, alongside the 33 points Fossil Dig in Genesis format. And yet, they refuse to print a card to replace it, maintaining its place as an essential part of basically any Dino combo, permanently hampering the deck. GMX is suffering not only from Dinos, but specifically Miscellaneousaurus's success. But let's close this compliment sandwich by talking about just how flexible this deck is. While you do have to be on a bit of a critical mass of the GMX and Dino cards in order to avoid burning yourself to death, if you want to take a walk on the wild side, this deck has no locks. You could do all sorts of funky stuff, like shoving these cards into a Fire Warrior pile where you can easily search Saland, a Psychic deck where Kimridge is mediocre removal, a Reptile pile where Noma is there. You could do something with Fur Hire, and, of course, Yummy Mitsurugi. Yep, you can shove these cards into Yummy Mitsurugi, and you can use Anodorn Archosaur to pop your fusion and search Habakiri. If you were looking for the 15th best engine to pair with Yummy Mitsurugi in the wake of the new ban list, you came to the right place. Can the deck win games? Yeah, it's Yummy Mitsurugi. Of course it could win games. Is it better than any other Yummy Mitsurugi build? Probably not. But it is funny though, I can't deny that. I suppose that this is technically the most competitive build of the deck, but I think it's more likely to blow up in your face than anything else. Besides, if you want to combine GMX with another engine, I've developed a much better option for you. Presenting Branded GMX. Since the GMX monsters are all level 8 fusions, they play well under the locks of their set companion Fallen of the White Dragon or the classic Branded Fusion, neither of which takes your normal summon from Saland or Oviraptor. If you draw access to one of them and your GMX normal summon, you can end on both GMX fusions in addition to Ecclesia and the Dark Dragon and Cartesia with a Fallen and the Virtuous line in the back row, or Mirror Jade, depending on whether using the White Dragon or Branded Fusion respectively. You still have a decent amount of non-engine space too, with enough dinos to make it less likely you'll die in the spot. You even get to flex a Super Poly package that helps boost your consistency on Branded and High Spirits. Turns out, favorite hero is a level 8 warrior with 2500 attack. Who knew? The Branded package really helps boost the GMX end board to a more acceptable level for the modern format. Although, the Branded engine has the exact same fragility problem of GMX. A negate on Albaz the White or Branded Fusion ends that entire line too. But at least that leaves you open to run your GMX line, or vice versa depending on the order you choose to activate them. Just hope they don't have a negate for both. Of course, GMX isn't the best engine to pair with Albaz. That would be Dracotail, obviously. But GMX adding some dino power to Albaz gives it some fun tools to play with, and a deck with as restrictive a lock as Albaz the White and Branded Fusion doesn't have as many other options. Instead of being the 15th best side engine like in Yummy, GMX is probably like the 3rd or 4th best side engine for Branded. Right now, the deck doesn't really add a ton to any end board it's a part of, but it does still add a Trident, and it has a lot of flexibility that gives it an edge over other engines, especially as we get Wave 2 to hopefully boost its power. The deck just doesn't have any locks, so it gets to play with everyone. So, with all that said, what does the deck need to see in the second wave to succeed? Honestly, not much. Like, it's weird to have all that complaining about how the deck feels like it's a long way from being competitive, but then say it doesn't need much to get there, but that's exactly where we are. I think the deck needs 3 primary things. It needs extenders, a new boss monster to sit alongside Velox, and more spell traps. Just the things to fix the 3 fixable problems I mentioned earlier. A potential second wave could very easily consist of a couple of monster extenders, a new fusion for Saland and Danine, a spell or 2 that helps extend and add consistency, and a searchable trap with an interruption to add to that end board. Ideally, none of these would have the excavation damage, and preferably they'd have some healing going on. Maybe Saland Fusion could excavate but heal for every card revealed to play into the theme still. Additionally, I'd really like to see some changes outside of the archetype. It's time to shit or get off the pot in regards to Misk. Either ban the damn thing and let us move on from it, or let us play with the fucking card. I'm either looking for a new mini Misk card that serves the purpose of summoning a dinosaur from the deck, like Misk but without the dreaded protection effect, or for Misk to just return to us in full in both TCG and Genesis. Dino does absolutely nothing in either format, so come on, let's let these beasts free from the prison that is a singular card that powers the whole fucking deck. I'm overall hopeful that these cards mean a change for dinosaurs. Unlike Dinomorphia, which doesn't seem to want to play with the other dino cards despite being pure dinosaur, this deck, while not chock full of dinos, still wants to run some of the old favorites. It's a new evolution of the deck that still retains some trace characteristics. It's felt with plenty of room for non-engine, still puts down some really good cards, plays well under Molcharmy's Maxi and Droll, and cuts back on so many annoying garnets. It just needs that little push. So, once again, here I am at the end of Wave 1 of a new TCG World Premiere Archetype, hoping for a good Wave 2. Thanks for watching. Hey there, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've got a lot more for you if you want them. Just hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notifications. I'd also appreciate if you left me a like and a comment and maybe shared the video around with your friends. You can also follow me on all the usual social media sites. Just check out my website in the description below for more info. My videos are funded by my patrons, Ko-fi subscribers, and YouTube members, whose names you'll see scrolling by in these credits here. For just $1 a month, you too could find yourself here, trapped in my end screen for all eternity, among other benefits. In particular, I'd like to thank Jeremy Coatney, Frog Prince Michael, Fleakill, Haru Hayes, the Almighty Ferret Lord, Fire Mizumi, Beastman, Bryn, and Beelzis. A big thanks to all my patrons and to my little community as a whole. Remember to be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and have a wonderful whatever time it is for you. Bye-bye!